Hi, this is Harry Guinness for Tuts Plus, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to split tone your images in Lightroom. My colleague Marie has written a great article on the theory of split toning. I'm just going to focus on putting it into practice. Split toning is where you add one color to the shadows and a different one to the highlights. It's really good for creating a specific look or for changing how an image feels. This is a portrait I took of a model tan near where I live. It's a color photo that I've added split toning to. There's blues in the shadows and there is a small bit of very desaturated orange in the highlights. The split toning is really cooling down the image. If I click over here on the little tick on the split toning panel, I'll turn it off and you can see what the image looked like before. As you can see, it's a far warmer and much less striking image. If I turn the split toning back on, you can see that the blues and the shadows really adds to the cold feel I was going for. If you're interested in doing this sort of things to your images, check out Marie's article. The other thing split toning is great for is recreating certain looks. Old film developing processes such as sepia and cyanotype are easy to recreate with split toning. Here's the same image processed in a sepia style. Sepia involves adding a lot of muted browns and reds and the colors that go either side of them into the shadows and the highlights. If you look over at the split toning panel, you can see I'm adding some very desaturated reddy browns to the highlights and some very desaturated greens to the shadows. I'm really adding them mainly to the highlights because you can see the balance slider is set all the way up to 100. The other popular vintage processing style to recreate is cyanotype. Here's the same image again processed as a cyanotype image. You can see I'm adding a lot of blues to both the shadows and the highlights. It's a little bit more saturated than the colors in the sepia image. If you look over at the split toning panel, you can see that once again I'm mainly adding in the highlight color, and it's this not too desaturated blue. It's about 30% saturation. And again, there's this sort of lilac color going into the shadows, and that's again at roughly 30% saturation. The exact values don't really matter. It's all about recreating this blue look that you get with cyanotype images. Depending on the colors in your image before you convert it to black and white, it will depend what values you enter over here. And that's what we're going to cover next. Here's the same image once again, this time in black and white with no split toning applied yet. I'm going to reconvert this into a cyanotype image. There's two ways I can do that. I can either use the hue and saturation sliders, or I can click on the color swatch and choose a color. For my highlight color, I want something nice and blue. I like to click further up on more saturated, and then I dial back the saturation later on. This just makes it easier to see what color you're using. Cyanotype's quite close to green, so I really want to be working around in the sea blue, sea green colors. So I think something like that for my highlights. Click the X to close, and then do the same for my shadows. For cyanotype, I like to use a darker blue, so somewhere around there I think is what I want for the shadows. Click X. If you remember from the previous image, the saturation was around 30%, not 90%. So I'm just going to dial it back here until I get the look I want. It might be 30%, it could be slightly higher, it could be slightly lower. Again, it depends on the image. I know 30% works, so I'm just going to dial them back to about 30% each. I like how that's starting to look. I'm just going to play around with the balance slider. In the other image, if you remember correctly, the balance was quite a lot higher. I'm not sure I need that for the exact colors I've chosen here, but it's always good to play around with the sliders like this and just get a feel for where you want it. There's a lot of shadows in the image. If you look at this at a histogram, her hair is very dark, the background's very dark, her jacket's very dark. So the only real highlights by the histogram as standard would be in her face and hands. So that's why the balance is a little higher, because I want some of these highlights on the rocks that are actually falling in the shadow area of the histogram to get the highlight color. Okay, I'm happy with that. It's a slightly different cyanotype conversion than the previous one, but that's okay. If I want to do the exact ones, I could always just go back and then type in the numbers. Split toning in Lightroom is really easy, and it's a really nice way to add something different to your images and to create a different feel. If I turn off the split toning, we'll see the original black and white, and you can see that the image feels cold but doesn't necessarily look it. Whereas once I turn on the split toning and you get the cyanotype look, the visual colors match the feel of the image. This is the sea back here, and she's standing on a rocky ledge on a cold grey day in a coat. So the vibe I had in the place and the feeling I had when taking the photos was quite cold, so I wanted to recreate that, and this cyanotype really does that. On Tuts Plus, we've got some other great content on split toning your images, so check out the rest of this tutorial below for links to those other articles. I'm Harry Guinness, and thank you for watching.